Here are a few more archaeological artifacts that prove the case that Israel is not a black race and neither was Jesus black. The following link, see this picture here, is from 9th century BCE, a black obelisk of Shalmaneser III, Israelite King Jehu bowing before Shalmaneser III. Note that the hair and beard of the bowing Israelite king is consistent with being Caucasoid and not Negroid or Mongoloid. Consider also the following. Some scholars have decided to test the validity of the claim that there exist Jews of African descent. Parfit came to the conclusion that the Lemba people of Zimbabwe may have some connection to ancient Jewish populations based on historical and anthropological records. Moreover, a geneticist named Tabor J found that Lembas had 50% Y chromosomes that were Semitic in origin and 40% Negroid. This test seems to verify the existence of Jews of African descent, though this may be seem to confirm the Hebrew Israelites' claim. It implies only that those who can trace their heritage to the Lemba are likely ethnically Jewish. Contrarily, the Phalaces of Ethiopia, whom the black Hebrew Israelites were used to prove their validity, were proven to have no biological connection to the ancient biblical Israelites through genetic testing. Therefore, the myth that the son of King Solomon and Queen of Sheba became the first king of Ethiopia conflicts with the available scientific evidence. Thus, the reader should conclude that unless we can show that all African Americans originate from the Lembas tribe, Hebrew Israelites have no basis for the claim that all African Americans are descendants of the ancient Hebrews. It is false to reason that the existence of some African Hebrew descendants proves the claim that all African Americans are Israelites. Now let's look at some scriptures. The precious sons of Zion. 7. Her Nazarites were brighter than snow and whiter than milk. They were more ruddy in body than rubies, like sapphire in their appearance, and now their appearance is blacker than soot. They go unrecognized in the streets. Their skin clings to their bones. It has become as dry as wood. Lamentations 4:2 and 7:8. The above is saying that they were very white. Oh, okay. But after disaster, they would be unrecognizable. It brings to mind something about Job. Verse 7, so Satan went out from the presence of the Lord and struck Job with painful boils from the sole of his feet to the crowns of his head. And he took for himself a potsherd with which to scrape himself while he sat in the midst of the ashes. Notice what Job later said, my skin grows black and falls from me. My bones burn with fever. Job was not black, or would not have said that. But with his affliction and the ashes, he said his skin was growing black. Let me just correct that. Job lived in Uz, Job 1:1, which is in an area near Ur of the Chaldeans, which is where Abram was from. Now, various ones, like the late Raymond McNair, believe that Job was the builder of the Great Pyramid, and that historical evidence shows that his daughter was blonde and white. Notice something about that. The pigmentation, correct that spelling, of the Egyptians was usually a brunette white. The daughter of Cheops, the builder of the Great Pyramid, is shown in the colored bas reliefs of her tomb to have been a definite blonde. Her hair is painted bright yellow, stippled with fine red horizontal lines. This is the earliest known evidence of blondism in the world. Even if this is not referring to Job's daughter, but instead of an Egyptian, again we see evidence of people who were white. Isaac's brother-in-law and Jacob's father-in-law was named Laban. The 19th century Hitchcock's new and complete analysis of the Holy Bible defines Laban to mean white, shining, gentle, brittle. Laban's sister was Isaac's wife, Rebekah, and his daughters were Jacob's wives, Leah and Rachel. The name Laban would not seem to be describing a black man. The word Lebanon is related to Laban and means the white mountain from its snow. Thus, it would make sense that the name Laban would have something to do with whiteness. David seems to have been white based on the following description. Now he is ruddy with bright eyes. Ruddy means red or rosy. Many believe this points to David having red hair. Notice the following related to Esther, whose cousin Mordecai was of the tribe of Benjamin, called a Jew. Esther, a fair person. Now let us notice that Esther, who became queen of the Persian Empire, was a lighter fair skinned person. She was of the tribe of Benjamin. He, Mordecai, brought up Esther, and the maid was fair and beautiful. This word fair is the same word that was used when speaking of Sarah. It means to be bright, and is the only place in the book of Esther where this word is used. We read that Vashti, the former haughty queen, was fair, but the Hebrew word used here is a different word and does not mean to be bright, but it means to be beautiful. We read also of fair young virgins, but the Hebrew word Yafeh is not used in regard to any of these women, but is used only in chapter 2, verse 7, in connection with the Queen Esther. She had a bright or light skin. Notice also, the Israelites were predominantly Nordics. Now let us go to history and also to the scriptures to prove out what the pre-captivity people of the 12 tribes of Israel were really like. Professor Sayce makes the following significant comment. The names of the Jewish towns captured by the Egyptian king Soshek, recorded on the walls of the temple of Karnak, are each surmounted with the head and shoulders of a prisoner. Casts have been made of the heads of Sir Flinders Petrie, and the racial type represented by them turns out to be Amorite and not Jewish. The Egyptian king who made these lifelong engravings of Amorite prisoners when the land of Israel was Pharaoh Soshek. What does Professor Sayce mean when he states that these Palestinian prisoners turned out to be Amorite and not Jews after all? By Amorite he means they were a blonde Nordic type. He further states that David was blonde and red-haired. It is plain that the Amorite belonged to the blonde race. His blue eyes and light hair prove this incontestably. So also does the color of his skin when he compared with that of other races depicted by the Egyptian artists. At Medinet Habu, for example, where the skin of the Amorite is pale pink, that of the Lebu, or Libyan, and the Mashushash, or Massis, is red like that of the Egyptians, though we know that the Libyans belong to a distinctively fair complexioned race. In a tomb of the 18th dynasty at Thebes, the Amorite chief of Kadesh has a white skin and a light red-brown eyes and hair. Note carefully Professor Sayce's remarks, as they have a very important bearing upon the conclusions which will be drawn later. We shall see that Sayce and others call the Israelites Amorites, though the people of Israel were not Amorites in the true sense. The original Amorites were descendants of Ham through his son Canaan, and were dark complexioned. Fix that. like all of Ham's descendants. Sayce then goes on to show that at that time a line of blondes extended all the way from the northern coast of Africa east to the corner of the Mediterranean, then north to Kol, Syria, and that this was only broken by the delta of Egypt, where we know darker people have always lived. Blonde Israelites called Amorites. These statements show clearly that these Israelitish Amorites were a blonde race. Now let us go back and analyze the statement made by Professor Sayce in regard to the campaign of Soshenk, the Egyptian pharaoh. According to Professor Sayce, and many historians give similar accounts, Pharaoh in his campaign against Israel took a number of prisoners. These so-called Jewish prisoners turned out to be Amorite. This is according to Professor Sayce. Also remember that a number of paintings, according to Professor Sayce and other sources, show that the Amorites were definitely a blonde race. Their features were more like the Northwest Europeans of today. It should be pointed out, however, that the Pharaoh who took these Israelitish prisoners, called Amorites, was the So, meaning in 2 Kings 17:4, it was So, Pharaoh of Egypt, who recorded his conquests on the walls of the temple at Karnak. Whether these Israelitish prisoners were taken in the time of Rehoboam, or at the later date, in the time of Hosea, king of 10-tribed Israel, the fact remains that the prisoners were taken from the people of Israel. They were definitely a blonde race. Dr. James Tabor reported that he found hair of an ancient Israelite man in something called the Shroud of the Tomb. One of the more fascinating finds in this tomb, one that has not received much attention, was the preservation of a sample of Jewish male hair. The hair was lice-free and was trimmed or cut evenly, probably indicating that the family buried in this tomb practiced good hygiene and grooming. The length of the hair was medium to short, averaging 3 to 4 inches. And the color, let's see, the color was reddish. Go to this website to refer to these. This is supportive of the view that the ancient Israelites were not black Africans. There also was found braided hair of a woman at Masada. The length of the hair indicates that it was from a woman. The color is now quite dark, but since her hair darkens as it ages, its original shade cannot be determined. Now, quite dark would indicate that it was not originally black, hence it would have been blonde, brown, or red. A picture of it in the above paper indicates that the individual hair strands were round like Caucasoids have. It was not flat kinked as Negroids have. This also would indicate that she was not a black African. Now, some claim she was not an Israelite, but most scholarly sources I checked would believe that she was. Getting back to the tomb of the Shroud, it is also about 2,000 years old. There were about 20 Jews buried there. Note some information about the DNA result. Mitochondrial DNA analysis confirmed the locks of hair were contextually associated with the skeletal remains found in locus SC1. The haplotype designations for mtDNA analyses are population categorizations that have been used extensively in the past to imply to population movements. The haplotypes for the tomb of the Shroud individuals are commonly distributed throughout the north of Africa and the Middle East to Eastern Europe. The tomb occupants exhibit a number of different maternal influences. The maternal relatedness of these individuals supports inferences that this Akeldama site was a family tomb which was in use